Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science-packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like-minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on the Health Trip Podcast. Some women cruise through menopause without experiencing the many adverse side effects of hormonal chaos. But most women do experience a long list of physiological changes, including weight gain, hot flashes, hair loss, skin changes, bodily aches and pains, gut issues, feeling like insects are crawling on your skin, weird body odor, gum issues in your mouth, vaginal dryness, urinary leakage. I could spend the next 10 minutes just listing more symptoms. It's an absolute hormonal disaster and lasts for many years. Women are feeling confused about who to talk to and who to see for menopause care, and are confused by the conflicting information they hear from their provider and what they hear on social media and from their friends. It makes sense to start with your OBGYN, but the problem is that most of them are not properly trained in advanced menopause care. How about your primary care doctor? You most likely will run into the same problem. I came across my next guest on social media and found myself going back to her and her partner's website to learn more about them. I was drawn to them because of their no-nonsense approach to women's care, and I love the way they busted many women's health myths floating around the internet. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Sarah Musley. She's an esteemed endocrinologist, dedicated mother, and co-founder of Anzara Health, a pioneering multi-state female-owned concierge endocrinology platform. Her practice focuses on women's health and medical weight loss, providing personalized care to patients with a variety of hormone disorders, including metabolic dysfunction, PCOS, and thyroid disease. She's passionate about improving her patients' health from the inside out. Dr. Musley employs a holistic approach that addresses both physical and emotional well-being. Raised in a multicultural household, she speaks 4 languages and has had the privilege of living and working on multiple continents. You can hear her speak both English and Spanish to her online community, making sure that more women are informed, educated, and heard about their menopause journey. A short medical disclaimer before we dive in. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or to make any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Consult your physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So sit back, open your mind, and let's dive into the endocrine system. Hi, Dr. Sarah. Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's really nice to see you, and I thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too, because I have not had an endocrinologist on my show yet. So this is going to be an excellent conversation for people to get to know what type of doctor an endocrinologist is, why you're important in the menopausal journey. So let's just start off with you giving us a little bit of information about your medical training, how you came to become an endocrinologist, and how you landed in this space of women's health.
Sure. Thank you so much. So it's a good question with a bit of a long answer. I've kind of lived in many places. My training and my work has taken me to quite different countries and geographic areas. But in short, I grew up in the Middle East. I'm of Middle Eastern and Latin American heritage, and I completed my undergraduate degree on the East Coast of Canada. I did a master's degree in public health education and health promotion in the Netherlands. And then I went to medical school at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, which was a really beautiful experience. And then I moved to the US in 2012, and that's where I did all my post-medical school, let's say, training. So internship, residency in internal medicine. I was chief resident for a year at Memorial Sloan Kettering Center here in New York. And then I was a fellow in endocrinology at NYU. after I finished my training, I actually spent a few years, almost 5 years, living in Honolulu, Hawaii. I worked at Kaiser Permanente as a general endocrinologist, seeing, everything that we see, anything to do with hormone dysfunction, diabetes, osteoporosis, adrenal disorders, pituitary disorders. And I, really got to kind of hone in my skills and put into practice everything that I learned. And in 2022, it was, what, like a year or two into COVID, I got married, and, it was time to head back to the mainland. My husband lived here in New York. So, that wasn't just long distance. It was like long distance on steroids, New York and Hawaii.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
And so in the process of planning this kind of return, my partner, Anna Kausel, and I came up with, this vision of Anzara Health, and we started working on it in early 2022 and launched at the end of 2022. And this really it started it is it's a I mean, we're a multi-state concierge endocrinology platform, and so we, will take care of anything within the hormone world, let's say. But really what we have found, we're very, very passionate about this, and there's a huge need, is in the area of women's health. So of course we're taking care of men, but I would say the majority of our patients are women, also of very diverse backgrounds, like we have. And we've become, I would say, very expert in treating perimenopause, menopause, and medical weight loss.
So it's really interesting that coming from an endocrinology background, that you're now moved into this focus of women's health. And women's health, as you know, on the internet is just completely blowing up, right? As it should, right? We all need to be more informed and educated so we can pivot our life in a direction that where we're going to thrive during this journey. But a lot of women are still confused over who they should go to manage this time in their life. They have a primary care physician, they have an OBGYN who they might see once a year, once every other year. Um, Most people don't go to an endocrinologist. So what are you doing at Anzara Health to change that conversation?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. There aren't many of us. So there's not a lot of endocrinologists graduating every year from fellowship and starting to practice. We're a pretty small number of physicians specializing in endocrinology here in the US and in the world, actually. So yes, I agree. Most people have a primary care doctor. Most women have a GYN. Most women don't have an endocrinologist, or many people don't even know what we do. So it's unfortunately, no specialty or subspecialty is learning enough about women's health, menopause care, and it's sad. I mean, I think that, a multi-specialty approach to care is ideal. And so having your GYN on board, having your primary care doctor on board, having your endocrinologist or internist on board is the best way to approach this. Um, and I think that, the narrative is changing. The need is becoming much more apparent. There is a push and a drive for doctors to educate themselves and learn about this, because patients know a lot. They're more aware, they're asking excellent questions, they're seeking help, they're advocating for themselves, they're showing up to doctor's appointments with research and, data. And so doctors, I think, in multiple specialties are having to do this. And I hope that very soon, if maybe it's happening already, but I hope that medical schools and residencies in various fields are starting to realize that this is something that is essential. It's not optional, it's essential. What are we doing? Well, I think that, well, we were trained in the study of hormone health. So hormone deficiencies, hormone excesses, gland health, all of that is kind of our area of focus. So, and we're internists also. So I think that our ability to really perform a very comprehensive evaluation of your health state today, and that includes blood work, hormone levels, deficiencies, nutritional and vitamin deficiencies, iron levels, liver function, kidney function, all of those things, as well as your bone health, as well as your cardiovascular health and cardiometabolic risks and all of that. We're very good at doing that and kind of piecing together a picture of your overall health, you as a person, not just your symptom, or not, well, every woman comes through the door with this or that. This is probably the same. Every patient is an individual and deserves to be treated, in a unique way. So we're doing that. We're offering, science-backed and evidence-based therapies to our patients. And in addition to this medical aspect, we have nutritionists on board and we have health coaches who are really talented on board. So I think we're really offering a very holistic approach to care. Yes, it's medicine when appropriate. Your nutrition cannot be ignored. How are you sleeping? How much are you moving? How are you coping with stress? All of those things contribute to better health and better quality of life for women.
I absolutely love listening to you talk about your model, your business model, and helping your patients because I've been going to my OBGYN, who I love, since I had all five of my babies, so a long time. And they don't have health coaches on board. And I talk to them all the time. Bring on health coaches. You're not here just to deliver babies. You're here to see us through postmenopause and beyond, right? We're going to be postmenopausal for 30, 40 years, hopefully. So I really appreciate your whole body approach because it is exactly what women need. But let's dive into the endocrine system because I think this is a really important system of the body to talk about. If you are someone like me, I am hypothyroid. I was pushed into hypothyroidism from a partial thyroidectomy over 25 years ago. So I learned about my thyroid health.
Mhm.
I'm now through menopause and in postmenopause. So I've learned, a bit about my sex hormones. But when, like you were saying, when we go to all these different cooks in the kitchen who might have a specialty on this part of your body or this part of your body, how do we connect all the dots? So I would like for you to help give us a tour of the endocrine system, an abbreviated tour, so that women can really understand how complex and complicated this orchestra of hormones can be.
Right.
And then we'll
Right.
dig into more things on the other side of that.
Sure. So it absolutely is an orchestra, and I actually have used that word in the past to kind of try and describe and portray what the endocrine system is and what it does. So think of a communication network within the body that's in control of, responsible for initiating and regulating and maintaining very important functions in the body, like growth, puberty, reproduction, metabolism, mood, appetite, our bone health, things like our body temperature, even our heart rate, every important function in the body is surely controlled or influenced by a hormone. Different organs in the body called glands produce hormones, and the hormones are these little chemical messengers or signals that travel through the bloodstream from an organ or a gland to a receiving cell or tissue or organ to deliver a message to work more or work less. And that way we're able to maintain healthy body functions. I don't love to use the word normal because normal,
Mhm, mhm.
but a healthy functioning body. Hormones bind to receptors that are, made out of protein, and these receptors can be on the surface of cell membranes or within the cells themselves. And when a hormone binds to its receptor, you get a cascade or a chain of reactions intracellularly that lead to the function that hormone, I guess, intends to lead to or to cause. So, different examples of glands include the thyroid, as you mentioned, our ovaries are glands, our pituitary gland. We have the pancreas as a gland. So, you know, all these glands produce different hormones. They're controlled by different, it's called feedback loops or feedback mechanisms, where too much of a hormone, is sensed by a gland, and the gland will upregulate or downregulate the hormone that it's responsible for producing. So yes, it's extensive, it's complex, and it takes us decades to learn, how this works, and to manage in a safe and effective way.
So a lot of physicians, especially on social media, talk about having hormone receptors all over our body, right? Especially like estrogen. Estrogen's, a hot topic to talk about right now, as it should be. And so we have estrogen receptors all over our body. But do we also have other hormone receptors all over our body? Does every cell have a receptor for every hormone?
Probably not for every single hormone, but I would say yes, most hormones are acting on a multitude of organs and tissues. So, estrogen that you mentioned, that's a beautiful example of that. Thyroid as well. The thyroid acts on our gastrointestinal tract, on our heart, on our blood vessels, on our brain, on our bones. Um, so many functions are also controlled by or regulated by the thyroid. So, that's, I think, what contributes to the complexity of all of this. It's not black and white. It's not, A plus B equals C. It's a lot more nuanced, and slightly more complicated than what many people think, and what many, people are receiving messages through social media and different channels that certain hormones have to be in balance, or, drink lemonade and it's gonna normalize, I don't know, your prolactin levels or your progesterone levels. And it's just not quite that simple.
Yeah. Let's talk about all the hormones are important, but let's talk about some of the more important hormones as it relates to the menopause transition. We've talked about, we can start with estrogen, but I'm going to leave this up to you to sort of drive this part of the conversation of what you really want midlife women to know about some specific hormones during this transition.
Yeah. So I would say the sex hormones probably are, good ones to start with. So estrogen and progesterone. So estrogen is responsible for us going through puberty, getting pregnant. When estrogen levels start to go down, we start to go through perimenopause and menopause. And progesterone is released when we ovulate. It helps us prepare for pregnancy and maintain pregnancy. Both of these hormone levels start to decline in perimenopause. And perimenopause usually happens about 8 to 10 years before you're actually going to go through menopause. And, let's say a deficiency or a lower concentration of either of the two hormones leads to certain symptoms and consequences in the body that we see, certain conditions and changes happening as we age and as we go through the menopause transition. So, and testosterone is another really important one, by the way. It's a very important female hormone. It's not just a male hormone. So testosterone starts to go down in our mid 20s, early 30s, and then progesterone and estrogen start to go down in perimenopause. The decline in progesterone is a little more organized and linear, as we approach, let's say, the age of 50 or 51, when most women go through menopause. The decline in estrogen is a little more erratic and disorganized, and the fluctuations between very high levels of estrogen and very low levels of estrogen can really lead us to feel very different and very unwell during perimenopause. So those three hormones super important, and I can talk a little more about them, or I can move on to another one if we're going to do this kind of as an intro.
Yeah, no,
Um,
let's talk about testosterone for a minute because that's one that is just starting to sort of get some spotlight. Personal story for me, when after I had my fourth or my fifth child, my ovaries stopped producing testosterone. I was at the levels of like a 90-year-old woman. And so I back then, we didn't have compounding pharmacies around for me to get a compounded form of testosterone. So I used a synthetic testosterone, which did not fare well with me. It was really difficult. My voice changed. I felt really aggressive. I had like, more of that masculine energy. So, I stopped taking it. But I've been on compounding testosterone for a very long time, probably the last 10 years of my life. I'm 56 now, and
Okay.
it has been an absolute game changer. I can't tell you how many midlife women I have worked with in my coaching business where they are the conversation of testosterone doesn't even present itself on the table to have, chat about. And women are feeling the low libido, their zest of life is gone. That's what happened to me. I had no more zest for life. I felt very depressed, no motivation to do anything. So, yeah, I want to spend a little time on testosterone.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, really interesting hormone. And in all of my training, I learned the ins and the outs of testosterone replacement in men. I never once received any training or education on how you prescribe it for women, or why you should or shouldn't, or anything like that. In the US, there is no FDA approved testosterone to be used in women. And also, there's very little, I think because of that, very little research happening looking at the benefits or the consequences of using testosterone in women. Australia is the only country I know of that has an FDA approved testosterone to be given to women. Now, most commonly, it's being given to women with low libido, um, and it works. But we also know that it helps mood, and it helps women sleep better, and it helps energy levels, and it helps bone density and muscle mass. So the effects are can be very positive. If given to the right patient and under the supervision of someone who knows what to look out for and what to be careful of. So, we're going to give testosterone to someone who has symptoms and has a low testosterone level. And we're going to check levels pretty frequently, I would say, almost on schedule. When you compare that to estrogen or progesterone, we really don't need to check levels. We almost don't check levels. But for testosterone, you want to check the level about a month or a month and a half after starting the testosterone, to make sure that, it's hopefully at a normal kind of nice mid-level range and not too high, and that the patient is feeling benefits and improvement. And then after that, I would say every 3 months or so, 3 to 6 months, if you're really, really comfortable and the patient has been on testosterone for a long time and there's been no issues. But I would say in the first year, after that initial check, once they're on a stable dose, every 3 months, you're checking a level. And we like to check, blood counts as well, because too much testosterone can cause you to make too many red blood cells. We like to check liver function. We also like to check cholesterol levels. Anything that could potentially be adversely impacted by testosterone, we're going to keep an eye on that and check it. Now, side effects like the deepening of voice, clitoromegaly. So some women will notice that, their genitalia is changing. Some women will grow, unwanted facial hair, acne, it can become a problem. Some women feel like aggressive and on edge. You're going to see that if you're on too high of a dose of testosterone. And I think that's why it's really important to have really close monitoring and follow up, because before you even get there, or if you're starting to, get into that territory, you're just adjusting and tweaking your dosing to prevent kind of those changes from happening, some of which can be irreversible, which would be really unfortunate and scary.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're bringing up the testing. I know that, for estrogen and progesterone, we don't really need to look at lab markers, but I agree. Testosterone is super important. I also think it's helping a lot of providers learn more about how to manage testosterone levels in women. One symptom is hair loss. And I would like to bring that up because August happens to be National Hair Loss Month. I've been on a hair loss to hair growth journey for the last 25 years for so many reasons. But basically, I have genetic predisposition to hair loss and then half the thyroid taken away and menopause, all those things. My DHT levels, like so many other women who do use testosterone replacement therapy, that can drive your DHT level if you want to talk about dihydrotestosterone and that conversion, because it will go to the hair follicles. The androgens go to the hair follicle and it will trigger it'll trigger the release of the hair follicle too soon in the growth cycle. And
Right.
so getting tested every 3 months, I think is so incredibly important.
Right. Right. And I think again, as long as you're being, cautious and if you need to increase the dose, you're doing so slowly and based on levels and symptoms, hopefully you're not going to run into issues with that. And if you do and you kind of reverse your course quickly, then that's fine. The hair loss will reverse. You run into problems when women, for example, are using pellets. And once pellets are under your skin, it's virtually impossible to remove them. And it's very hard to control once the pellets are in how much they release or how much you absorb. So if you're receiving a high amount of testosterone replacement for a prolonged period of time and you cannot stop that, then that's when you're going to see, hair loss that can be irreversible.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I did use pellets 10 years ago and it triggered hair loss for me. I stayed on them for 18 months and now I just use a compounding cream, which I think is the way to go for women. Some women love pellets though. Some women listening to this podcast are going to say pellets work for me,
True.
and they might be working with a provider who is very good at controlling the amount of pellets that go in. I can see how some women would like it because they get it 2, 3 times a year and it lasts for a long time. So it's the convenience factor is there. But if you're someone who is sensitive and predisposed to symptoms or things like hair loss, yeah, I would advise against it as well.
Right. No, and with the pellet issue, I mean, like everything in medicine, right? There's pros and cons to every approach. And
Yep.
some things just don't work for most people, but they work for some, and that's
Mhm.
fine. I think we were forced to resort to things like pellets during an era when no one was really interested in discussing hormone replacement with women. We have a whole generation of women who's gone without, unfortunately, starting especially in 2002. And so, yes, everyone who needed or still wanted to be on hormone replacement had to go to things like pellets and compounding, pharmacies
Mhm.
became very, very popular. And I can see why, I understand why.
Yeah. Let's move on to another hormone that would be important for women to really understand. What's your next?
Yeah. I love the thyroid. I love the
Mm.
thyroid gland. So we all have thyroids, men and women do. It's a small butterfly shaped gland that sits right in the front of the neck and it produces thyroid hormone. And the function of the thyroid is regulated by thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH, which is made in the brain. So the brain senses how much thyroid hormone is floating in the blood. And if the amount is just right, the TSH signal continues as is. If there's too much thyroid hormone because you have an overactive thyroid or you're taking thyroid hormone, then that TSH signal kind of decreases to signal to the thyroid, hey, slow down, you don't need to produce so much thyroid hormone. And the opposite is true. If your thyroid gets lazy or you get your thyroid taken out and you don't have enough thyroid hormone on board, the brain also senses that and the TSH level is then, upregulated so that there's a stronger signal to the gland to, hey, you need to work a little harder and produce more hormone, more thyroid hormone than you're making now. Interestingly, as we get older, and this is true for both men and women, but probably more for women, we tend to have kind of a slowing down of our thyroid gland that's actually evolutionary. And we will tolerate a little bit of that as long as, symptoms are, you're asymptomatic, it's called subclinical, or as far as, the numbers are, within a certain range. And we know well what that range is, and we'll watch closely for that. But as we get older and as we're transitioning through menopause, I guess as women, we're more likely during that time to become hypothyroid if we're going to become hypothyroid. And it's important to check for that and to treat hypothyroidism if you're hypothyroid and symptomatic from it. Because there's some overlap in symptoms. So changes in weight, changes in mood, poor sleep, definitely fatigue can be caused by low thyroid states and by perimenopause and menopause. And so, you treat what you can so you can kind of figure out, fix the issue if that's possible. And if you treated the thyroid and the symptoms still persist, then it's something else, causing those symptoms. Another hormone that we talk a lot about is cortisol, right? A lot of
Wait, before we move on to cortisol, I want to finish up on thyroid for just a second. So hold that thought. Why is it so difficult for people, and we're talking about women here, to go to their provider and get a full thyroid panel? What is looking at TSH good enough?
if you ask an endocrinologist, no. So using a TSH alone in most cases is okay as a screening tool. But once you've gotten to see an endocrinologist, I don't like a TSH on its own. I like a TSH and at least a free T4. That way I know what the pituitary is doing and I know what the thyroid is doing. Um, I'm going to be very honest with you. I think most physicians, most doctors don't like to deal with thyroid. I don't know if it's like a lack of understanding or I'm not sure what it is, but it's a complaint I hear about from most patients. Most patients, I've been complaining of thyroid symptoms for years. I asked for these tests and my doctor wouldn't do them, or they did them and they said, I was fine, even though I wasn't. So my preference and I know that by guidelines TSH alone is sufficient for screening. My practice is to check a TSH and a free T4. And if you are on T3 replacement like Cytomel, I'll also check a T3. If you're not, I probably won't, unless a patient says to me, I want to know what my T3 level is. I read this and that. I feel like something's wrong. Can you please check a T3? I absolutely will do that. As long as you're comfortable and happy and you have peace of mind, I'll check almost whatever you want.
Because what you're saying is some of the symptoms of low thyroid or hypothyroidism mimic perimenopause.
Yeah.
And this is a stage in a woman's life where they're starting to gain weight around their midsection. They've changed nothing in their lifestyle. And all of a sudden, they've got 5 to 7 pounds of a tire around their waist that they have never seen before. And,
Yeah.
you want to look at the full story of someone's health
Yeah.
so that you can rule things out or address things as they pop up. And so it's really frustrating for so many women to go into their provider and ask for a more advanced thyroid panel, because let's rule out if the thyroid isn't optimized, no matter what this woman does, it's going to be a challenge to lose weight.
100%. And to add to that, hypothyroidism, generally speaking, is autoimmune and it's treated with replacing thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone, levothyroxine or Synthroid, is the most commonly prescribed medication in this country, and we've been using it for decades and decades. And it's frankly a very simple thing to do. It's one pill taken once a day. I always say take it in the morning, take it on an empty stomach with a couple of sips of water. You must wait 30 minutes before you have your tea or coffee or your breakfast or other medications. And if you're taking any vitamins that contain iron or calcium, please take those in the evening because they will interfere with absorption. That's the instruction. Start the thyroid replacement, check labs again in 6 weeks, every 6 weeks until you're at a dose that looks right and the patient feels well. And then you can check the levels twice a year, once a year in patients who are doing really, really well. So it's very worthwhile. It's a very simple thing to do, and it's very worthwhile to do it because patients can really feel so much better.
What do you say to the woman who says, yeah, maybe I'm hypothyroid, that's what my doctor said, but I'm going to try to handle this naturally?
It's going to be really hard to do that. There's no evidence that, I don't know what in the natural world would replace thyroid hormone. So you hear about, gluten-free diets and anti-inflammatory diets and, different supplements and things that, people believe will cure their hypothyroidism. Think if you have Hashimoto's, you have the positive antibodies, they're connecting or interacting with your thyroid cells, causing them not to work optimally and to not produce enough thyroid hormone. You just need to replace the thyroid hormone. That's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you for that.
yeah.
All right, let's move on to cortisol, another very important hormone.
Important and very, very much in vogue, right? So
Yes.
adrenal fatigue and, cortisol, too much cortisol and chronic stress causing. So cortisol is our, I guess, primary stress hormone produced in the adrenal cortex. So on top of each of our kidneys, we have a little pyramid-shaped gland called the adrenals, and the adrenals have kind of an outer layer, the cortex, and the inner part called the medulla. And every part of the adrenal glands makes I mean, all hormones are important, but very important hormones. And cortisol helps us deal with stress, survive difficult situations. It regulates our blood sugar, many, many, many things, really. And chronic stress as we get older, if we're chronically stressed, I think, especially during midlife, which I find for women is such a tricky time. There's so many things happening. I keep thinking about this concept of sandwich generation. Like, we're taking care of our kids, we're taking care of our parents, and I'm, as we just talked about, I'm going through that right now, and it's a really scary and it's just a time when you're pulled in a million directions. You're trying to, most of the women that we treat work. And so there's just a lot of moving pieces, and you're doing your best to keep everything under control. And so it's very easy to feel very chronically stressed, right? And so if your cortisol levels are elevated over a long period of time because of too much stress, that can lead to some, negative health outcomes, like weight gain, like poor sleep, like higher blood sugar levels, changes in your cholesterol levels. So you don't want that. So as best you can, you want to try and control the stressors. Easier said than done. So you do your best. You delegate things that you can delegate. You really need to look at your responsibilities and decide, like, do I have to take all of this on, or can I ask for help with this or that, or can I just leave a few things to the side and address them in, a few weeks or months or whatever. And then once you've done your best to kind of organize yourself in that way, what are your coping mechanisms first? What do you do when you're stressed? Do you exercise? Do you journal? Do you meditate? Do you dance? Do you pray? I don't know, but whatever works for you, even a few minutes a day has been shown to improve and to regulate cortisol levels and the stress response, and to really be beneficial to your health. And then, having good sleep also helps with cortisol. If you're chronically sleep deprived, either quantity or quality of sleep, your cortisol levels will rise, and you're not going to feel good, and your body will not function optimally.
So I want to back up a little bit on cortisol and talk about really what's happening from the time that we wake up. And when our cortisol, I think it's about a half hour after we wake up that our cortisol should be at its highest of the day. Sort of helps us get moving, get our day going, right? Gets all of our bodily systems awake and going. A lot of women work out in a fasted state. And I wanted to talk about all these other types of stressors besides the chronic stress that could also negatively or adversely affect your cortisol levels. So chronically working out in a fasted state is something that has been brought to my attention over the past many years.
Yeah.
Um, how about under eating? Staying in a caloric deficit long term, right? A caloric deficit on a weight loss journey short term is fine, and but long term use of that strategy is not fine. So what are some of these, how are some of these other types of stressors on the body affecting our cortisol and then affecting other things in our body?
Yeah. So, outside of, being on a weight loss journey and needing or wanting to lose weight, yes, you need to be in a calorie deficit, 300 to 500 calories a day to lose weight, not more than that. Cannot and does not need to be more extreme than that. Otherwise, we know, I mean, there's so much research showing the benefits of fasting, and intermittent fasting and all of that. Unfortunately, most of that research has been done in men, and we're not men, and we're not smaller men. We're women, and our bodies work differently. And there's good research coming out showing us that fasting is actually not beneficial to women, and in fact, it can be harmful, especially when it comes to exercising early in the morning in a fasted state. You know, you don't perform optimally, you don't benefit from your exercise as much as you probably could or should, and it's just undue stress on your body, and further, it's just more stress and higher cortisol levels, and you really don't need that. There's no benefit to it. So ideally, you are having some protein before you exercise in the morning, or whenever, and a good amount of protein within an hour after finishing your exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if that same woman is waking up and she's working out in a fasted state, is also someone who has a stressful job or just doesn't manage her stress very well. And now she's also having poor sleep. So she's not hitting that deep restorative sleep state. And the ex, explain the relationship between cortisol and melatonin production.
There's probably a relationship. I can't pretend right now that I know the exact relationship. I will say that, melatonin is kind of the sleepy hormone that's produced in the pineal gland. And it's not what keeps us asleep, it's what kind of gets us sleepy enough to
Right.
fall asleep. Really important. And as we age, we make less and less melatonin. So by 90, you're making like virtually none compared to when you're a child. So keeping that in mind, I think that as we're getting older, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you need to do everything in your power to help yourself sleep better, not, take away from your potential to sleep well and have good restorative sleep, which benefits your brain and your muscle and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to shift gears before we end to weight loss in women during this time in our lives because it's really hard. It's the by far the number one concern that I hear from women across the board in terms of working with them. And I know that you and your partner do a lot on weight loss and you really understand the GLP-1 incretins and I want to just dive down that path for a little bit with you and get your expertise on how to share with women really what's going on with the weight gain, why we're struggling, why GLP-1s are beneficial, but also to understand that our body makes GLP-1. I think some people don't know that our body has a capability of making this glucagon-like peptide hormone,
Right.
and it's not just a drug that we can get.
Yeah. Right. So why do we start to gain weight? And that term we have to be careful with because for many, many women, it's not that they gain weight, it's that their body shape or body composition changes. So even though the number on the scale might still look the same, there's this tendency to shift where we store our fat from breast tissue, hips, thighs, our butt, and we start moving the fat kind of upwards into the abdomen. And we start making and storing a lot more visceral fat than we ever did before. And this has to do with the decline in estrogen levels. What happens with visceral fat? Visceral fat is bad fat, right? Quote unquote. It's inflammatory, it's angry fat. It predisposes us to metabolic dysfunction, and with that, you have the risk of obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, including your rises in your blood pressure, rises in your cholesterol levels, inflammation overall, and even cancer, we think. So that's a problem. Once you have dysfunctional metabolism because of this visceral fat and fat collecting in your liver and all of that, it becomes much harder to lose weight and much harder to maintain, a healthy weight. Another very important factor that is related, but we can look at it independently of this decline in estrogen level, is that as we age, and this happens in men and in women, our lean muscle mass goes down. So this is called sarcopenia, and for women, it starts actually in our 30s. So we every year have less and less lean muscle mass. Lean muscle is super metabolically active. It helps our metabolism. It helps us maintain, a healthy weight. And so if you have less lean muscle mass and you're not doing much to maintain or rebuild and reinforce and maintain your muscle mass, then you've lost metabolism, or an ability to really metabolize the energy that you consume. You're storing fat where you shouldn't be. That combined with metabolic dysfunction from the visceral fat that we discussed, I mean, it's a great combination to help you gain weight slash change in your fat distribution and to make it very hard for you to lose weight. Also, during this time in life, like we talked about, stress, poor sleep. You might be sleeping poorly because of stress, or you might be sleeping poorly because you're having hot flashes and night sweats. You might be sleeping poorly because when your progesterone levels decline, it's very hard to reach those deep, deep restorative, levels of sleep. Um, or you sleep, but you wake up in the middle of the night and that 2 to 4 a.m., brain
Yeah.
starts going and you just can't quiet it down. Or, you woke up to go to the bathroom, got back in bed and you just couldn't fall back asleep. So there's many reasons why we don't sleep well. Another very important factor here is alcohol. So during this time, perimenopausal women, and definitely menopausal women will tell you, I used to be able to have 2 glasses of wine and I was fine. And now I have half and I can't tolerate it. I don't feel well and I don't sleep. If you combine all of this then with, you know, cravings and this need to constantly munch, and you're hungrier also because as estrogen levels come down, your hunger hormone ghrelin goes up. You become more resistant to the effects of the hormone leptin, which is our satiety or our fullness hormone, our fullness signal. It's just a perfect storm, right? And you gain weight and it's hard to lose the weight. But there's solutions and there's options to all of this. So I think what's important is to educate yourself and understand what's happening. And once you know what's happening, you can start targeting every factor. And, we've seen incredible success stories. I can't tell you. And that's why I think that's what keeps us going, right? It's a difficult, it can be a frustrating, confusing time in the life of your patients. But if you actually can implement changes and they see the benefits and the effects, and you can, be right there alongside them, witnessing their experience and the transformation in their health, it's like that just means the world to us.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of women really understand or are aware that estrogen deficiency
Mm,
is correlated with hunger and satiety signals.
mm,
And that's, I think, a really interesting because women are saying, I don't feel as satiated from my meal like I used to anymore. I'm constantly hungry. Like, how am I eating this well-built meal
yeah,
and I'm still hungry?
yeah. And the first thing we say to our patients here is, this is not your fault. This is not your doing. This is not your fault. There's, powers beyond almost your control here, contributing. And I think that really takes a big weight off of these women. And when you discuss with them the options that are available and the possibilities, there's such a sense of empowerment and motivation to, regain control and start making changes. And at first the results come slowly, but then once they start, it's really rewarding and really gratifying, obviously for the patient and for us as providers.
Yeah. I also think that women should know that estrogen deficiency has a lot to do with the way that GLP-1 hormone in our gut works. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's not a huge, I'm not able to find, really good, clear data, in humans that I can truly apply, to human patients. Or there's a lot of research, there's a lot going on in the lab. We know that estrogen and GLP-1 interact together and act in the brain and the hypothalamus. There's 3 specific areas. And together they control or regulate hunger, food intake, body composition or fat distribution, energy balance. So that's really, really important. Satiety. Also, there are estrogen receptors in the pancreas, and we know that estrogen helps the beta cells in the pancreas produce more insulin, and that helps you metabolize, I guess, or process your glucose better. So that's important. And then it can also contribute to better or more efficient, I guess, GLP-1 production in the gut. So there's definitely an interplay. It's not clear to me yet the actual mechanism, um, but it's something definitely to keep in mind. And we know that women who have estrogen deficiency, who are on hormone replacement therapy, including obviously estrogen, who use a GLP-1 for weight loss will lose up to 30% more weight, body weight, than the women who are on a GLP-1 without the estrogen component. So definitely something's happening for sure. And there are studies on rodents and mice, again in the lab, of conjugates, GLP-1 plus estrogen. And so people are thinking about this and looking at it. It's not yet something that I guess we talk about too much with our patients. I mean, we love the combination of HRT and GLP-1 in the right patient for sure. We see it, we see what it does. The moleculars of it, I'm just not expert in. I don't know.
Yeah. When you and I first met, we talked about the possibility of low dose GLP-1, like microdosing
Mhm.
this GLP-1 incretin. And I think that is so interesting. I don't like that there is still a negative stigma surrounding women who choose to use a GLP-1 on their weight loss journey, and not just about weight loss, but there's other health benefits to taking a GLP-1. And I look forward to this microdosing. Sorry, I'm in the city and
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll hear the sirens going off, but I look forward to hearing more data on this microdosing of GLP-1.
Right. Right. And in addition to the improvement in blood sugar levels and treatment of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, the benefits when it comes to weight loss, the cardiovascular benefit, which is something that we know. I mean, we know that this is true. The benefits in patients with fatty liver that are really being studied in the world of psychiatry and addiction, in the world of neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. It's so vast what these medications can do. It's really a shame that there is such a stigma. And now, there's people studying and writing about the anti-aging effects, potential effects of GLP-1. So it's I don't think, definitely not in my lifetime, but I don't believe there's a medication class that has revolutionized medicine the way GLP-1s, GIP, um, you know, um, medications have. It's
Yeah.
gonna be very hard to replicate this.
Yeah.
Really an exciting time. To be an endocrinologist now is a very exciting time.
Yeah. What's the most exciting part about being an endocrinologist right now for you in terms of women's health?
I mean, I really love what we're doing. I really think we've just put together, um, Anzara Health is a project that we're so obsessed with and dedicated to, and we're so proud of what we've built. There's such a good solid foundation now. We're almost 2 years in, and we really are working with time. We have time to sit down and listen to our patients and think and plan and strategize. And that's a gift. When you talk to any doctor working in the traditional model, when you're, dealing with insurance and reimbursements and all of that, you're unfortunately forced to practice in a way that goes against the reasons why we went to medical school and became doctors.
Yeah.
So we've designed this in a way that we've eliminated that rush and that pressure. So my first visit with any patient is almost an hour and 15 or an hour and 20 minutes long. And I have the luxury of taking that time.
Yeah.
I can speak to my patients whenever I want. This is not about writing prescriptions and speaking with a patient for 10 minutes every 3 or 4 months. If a patient needs to speak to me every 2 weeks, I'm there.
Yeah.
So it's really rewarding that way. And, we have a team of this, the very early days of this, it was two endocrinologists working through telemedicine, taking care of women in, 8 states, bilingual. But very, very quickly we realized, we can't really make the change and the impact that we want to just us. We need our dietitians, we need our health coaches, we need a full team. And we're all women, we're living all over the country, and we're all just very passionate and very excited about helping I like to say our women, it's not our patients, improve and truly transform their health. So I can't picture myself doing anything different right now.
One of the things that you and your partner do so well on social media is speak in Spanish, and that you communicate to this whole other community. I mean, there are so many languages out there, and you've lived in a lot of different cultures. And so you've been able to see firsthand how these cultures and the women within these communities are living and what they're dealing with. Um, I think it is so important that your voice is there for another community as well. How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening and really exciting. So between the two of us, Anna and myself, we speak English, Spanish, Arabic, French, and German. Right now, most of our care is being done in English. We're really starting to see a huge influx of Spanish-speaking patients, Latin American patients, needing our care and our help. And it's very exciting. It's very meaningful to us to be able to give back to our communities that way. And doing this work through social media has really shown us the void that exists in the Latin or Spanish speaking community. It's not just that it's taboo necessarily. When I compare, I think, I'm also very interested in what this looks like in the Middle Eastern or Arabic speaking population. I feel like it's more of a taboo in that group. In the Spanish speaking world, I've been going through this for years, and I thought it was in my head or that I was going crazy. I didn't know that this was my hormones, and what is perimenopause? I've never heard the word perimenopause. That's not surprising. I'd never heard the word perimenopause in medical school, internal medicine residency, or fellowship in endocrinology. So, and, many women believe that menopause is you stop having periods, you can no longer have a baby, and you have some hot flashes, and that's where it ends. So it's this shocking, wow, I didn't know this was a thing. And then now that I know it's a thing, where do I get help? Where do I get education and resources? There's not a lot of educational material out there, in the way I think that we're delivering it for these women. So
Yeah.
not social media, there's some, but not a lot. And like courses or modules, or it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing to see, amazing
Yeah.
to see. And we realize, like, if we thought we had a big job to do before, now it's that much bigger.
Yeah, no, it's very effective because I actually will go into one of your posts where it's all in Spanish, and I can see all the women who are Spanish speaking responding. I don't know what they're saying because that's, not a language I know, but
Mm.
I can see that they are just on fire, just coming back with their comments and, well, whatever their shares. So it is really effective. And I'm going to put you on the spot here before we say goodbye,
Yeah.
because you and your partner also do something really fun is you bust myths about
Yeah.
women's health. And so I'm going to ask you to provide your three top myths that you can bust, if you can remember them.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna name off the myth.
Yeah.
So menopause is just physical symptoms, and I have to learn to live with them, and that's that. Two, I would say, of course I'm gaining weight. I'm going through menopause. That's just how it is. The weight gain is inevitable, and there's nothing I can do about it. And three, I would say a really big concern that is honestly not discussed enough in any community is the sexual dysfunction or the change in the sexual life of a woman that happens starting in mid late 30s or whenever, let's say, perimenopause starts. And so women believe that equals the end of their sexual life as they know it, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. That one is so, so important. That could be a whole different podcast that we could do together and explore. Um, wow, Dr. Sarah, thank you so, so much for joining me today. It was just so amazing and lovely to talk to you and share your expertise with my community. Are you accepting new patients?
We're absolutely accepting new patients. The best way to find us is on our website on zarahealth.com or through Instagram. We're very active on Instagram. Both will have a link. Our phone number is
Mhm.
everywhere, and there's a WhatsApp line that people are
Hmm.
now, writing to us through WhatsApp, and we're responding very, very quickly. It's a good, effective, efficient way to communicate with us. So.
And I meant to ask you, and I forgot, what does the word Anzara mean to both you and your partner?
We really went through so many names. It's kind of sort of a combination of our names, but really it's a word that, it has its old roots in the Arabic language, and it's related to light or a vision or a clarity.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much again. I will absolutely have you back on. This was just wonderful.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you do as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for tuning in today.
Definitely. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.